Before Zara could even process the command, before she could scramble to her feet and run, the guards grabbed her. One seized her by the hair, yanking her head back. The other began tearing at her already tattered clothes. The thin fabric ripped easily, exposing her frail, malnourished body. Zara screamed, a raw, primal sound of terror and pain. "No, please stop. Somebody help me." The guards began to beat her. They slapped her face, kicked her sides. She curled into a ball on the ground, trying to protect herself, but the blows kept coming. Guests watched, their faces a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. Phones were discreetly pulled out, cameras recording the brutal spectacle, but no one moved to intervene. No one dared to cross the powerful bride on her wedding day. The world was a whirlwind of pain and humiliation. Zara's hope, which had carried her so far, was being beaten out of her with every blow. She was going to die here, at the gates of her father's new life, dismissed as nothing more than a piece of trash. And then, through the haze of pain, a voice cut through the air, clear and commanding. "Stop, not another hit." The voice belonged to a woman who moved with an authority that instantly commanded respect. She was tall, elegant, and dressed in a chic, understated suit that spoke of a different kind of power. Not the flashy, desperate power of Reina, but a deep, confident strength. This was Selina, Mr. Kareem's stepdaughter from his first wife's previous marriage. Though not his biological child, he had raised her as his own. Now, a formidable billionaire in her own right, Selina was known for her sharp intellect, her composure, and her unwavering sense of justice. She had arrived just in time to witness the horrifying scene. She pushed through the crowd of onlookers, her face a mask of cold fury. "I said stop." The guards, startled by her tone, froze mid-blow. They recognized Selina. Everyone in their world knew who she was. To defy her was to defy the Kareem family itself. Selina rushed toward the crumpled figure on the ground. She knelt, her expensive suit getting dusty, and gently reached out to touch the girl's shoulder. The girl flinched, then slowly looked up. Her face was bruised, swollen, and wet with a mixture of tears and blood. As their eyes met, a gasp escaped Selina's lips. She stared, her mind racing, trying to place the familiar features hidden beneath the pain and grime, the shape of the eyes, the curve of the brow. It was impossible, but it was true. "Zara," Selina whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Is it really you?" Hearing her name spoken with such tenderness, with a flicker of recognition, was like a balm to Zara's wounded soul. She looked at the woman's face, and through the fog of her trauma, another memory surfaced, a kind older girl who used to read her stories, who always treated her with gentle patience. "Selina," Zara breathed, the name feeling foreign and familiar on her tongue. I remember you." A wave of emotion washed over Selina's face, shock, horror, and an overwhelming surge of protective love. "My God," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "It's really you. We thought you were gone." She carefully began to help Zara sit up, wrapping her own jacket around the girl's exposed shoulders. Reina, who had been watching this exchange with growing panic, finally found her voice. "Selina, what are you doing? You know this girl. She's a liar, a common thief trying to ruin my wedding." Selina slowly rose to her feet, her eyes locking onto Reina's. The look she gave the bride was so full of ice and contempt that Reina involuntarily took a step back. "You will be silent," Selina said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Or I promise you, you will regret it for the rest of your life." The standoff was thick with tension. The guests held their breath. The bride, for the first time, looked utterly lost. The guard stood by, looking terrified. It was at that moment that another figure appeared, drawn from the main hall by the sudden, unnatural silence that had fallen over the entrance. It was the groom himself, Mr. Idris Kareem. "What is all this commotion?" Mr. Kareem asked, his voice laced with irritation. "Selina, what's going on?" His eyes scanned the scene, the stunned guests, the terrified guards, his furious stepdaughter, and his pale, stammering bride-to-be. And then his gaze fell upon the small, broken figure on the ground, wrapped in Selena's jacket. Time stopped. His breath caught in his throat, his heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, painful rhythm. He saw past the dirt, the blood, the bruises. He saw the eyes he had seen every day in his dreams for 9 long years. He saw the daughter he had buried in an empty casket. Zara. The name was a choked whisper, a prayer he hadn't dared to speak aloud for so long. On the ground, Zara heard that voice, the deep, rumbling voice from her most cherished memories. She turned her head slowly, her bruised face filled with a desperate, fragile hope. "Daddy." The world shattered, and then reformed in that single, earth-shaking moment. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. Every guest, every guard, every bird in the trees seemed to hold its breath. Mr. Kareem took a stumbling step forward, then another. He didn't walk, he fell. He dropped to his knees on the hard pavement right beside his long-lost child, oblivious to the cameras, the gasps, the horrified stare of his bride. He reached out with a trembling hand and touched her face, his fingers tracing the outline of her cheek as if to confirm she was real, that she wasn't another cruel phantom of his grief. "You're alive," he wept, the words torn from the very depths of his soul. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperate strength, as if he could physically fuse her to him and never let her go again. "My baby, my Zara, you're alive." He buried his face in her matted hair, and the sobs that racked his body carried the sound of 9 years of unimaginable pain finally being released. Zara clung to him, her own tears soaking his expensive suit, the word "Daddy" repeating over and over like a mantra. The guests watched, stunned into utter disbelief. The fairy tale wedding had just turned into something far more real, far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. The story of the day was no longer the union of a billionaire and his beautiful bride. It was the resurrection of a ghost. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Kareem, with Selena's help, slowly got to his feet, pulling Zara up with him. He held her close, his arm a protective shield around her, and then he turned to face Reina. The look in his eyes was a terrifying mixture of profound sorrow and a rage so deep it was chilling. All the love, all the trust he had placed in her, had curdled into ash. "You," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "You did this to my daughter." He didn't need an answer. The guilt was written all over her face. He turned to his head of security, his voice ringing with an authority no one had heard from him in years. "The wedding is off. Get everyone out, now." Then, without another glance at the woman he was about to marry, he and Selena gently guided Zara away from the wreckage of the wedding and toward the car that would finally, after 9 long years, take her home. The journey back to the Kareem estate was a blur of surreal emotions. Zara sat huddled in the back of the Rolls-Royce between her father and Selena, wrapped in a warm Kashmiri blanket. She was still in shock, her body aching, but for the first time in years she felt safe, truly safe. Her father never let go of her hand. He just held it, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles, his eyes constantly looking at her as if he was afraid she might vanish again if he blinked. Tears streamed silently down his face, but they were no longer tears of grief. They were tears of a miracle. When they arrived at the estate, the staff who had heard the news were gathered at the entrance, their faces a mixture of astonishment and joy. Many of them had been with the family for decades. They had known Zara as a little girl. To see her now alive was like witnessing a resurrection. Selena took charge with her usual quiet efficiency. A doctor was summoned immediately. A warm bath was drawn. The finest, softest clothes were laid out. Zara was gently led to a beautiful guest suite where she was cleaned. Her wounds were tended to, and she was given a warm, nourishing meal. She ate slowly as if her body had forgotten how to accept proper food. Through it all, her father sat by her side, never leaving her. When she was finally tucked into a large, comfortable bed, he sat in a chair beside her, just watching her breathe. "Forgive me," he whispered into the quiet of the room, his voice thick with guilt. Zara, my love, forgive me. I never stopped searching. I never gave up hope. Not really. Not in my heart. Zara, drifting in and out of a peaceful, pain-free sleep for the first time in memory, managed a small, weak smile. I found you, Daddy, she murmured. I knew I would. Those simple words were both a comfort and a dagger to his heart. While the Karim family was cocooned in their emotional reunion, Reina was left to face the humiliating fallout. The canceled wedding was the scandal of the decade. She was a laughingstock, her name and face plastered across every gossip blog and news site. She had flown so close to the sun, and her fall was spectacular. She retreated to the lavish apartment Mr. Karim had provided for her, her mind a toxic storm of rage and humiliation. She had been so close to securing the life she believed she deserved. And it had all been ruined by a filthy street rat who had crawled out of the past. But Reina was not the type to accept defeat. She was a survivor, a schemer. Her grief quickly curdled into a burning desire for revenge. She called her closest friend, Brenda, a woman as ambitious and morally bankrupt as she was. She ruined me, Reina hissed into the phone, pacing her apartment like a caged animal. That little brat ruined everything. But this isn't over. I will destroy her. I will make everyone believe she is a liar and a fraud. I will make him hate her. The plot was hatched in the dark heart of her fury. Reina's revenge was swift and vicious. She knew she couldn't attack Mr. Karim directly, so she aimed her poison at the most vulnerable target, Zara. With Brenda's help, she devised a plan to shred Zara's credibility and paint her as a manipulative scam artist. They paid a sleazy, down-on-his-luck journalist a hefty sum of money. Their instructions were simple. Create a scandal. The journalist, who had no qualms about manufacturing stories for cash, got to work. Within 2 days, a news story hit the internet, and it spread like a virus. The centerpiece of the smear campaign was a grainy, secretly filmed video. It appeared to show Zara, looking disheveled, in a clandestine meeting with a much older, wealthy-looking man in a hotel lobby. The accompanying article was filled with salacious innuendo. It suggested that Zara was a known escort who preyed on rich men, and that this reunion with her father was her most audacious scam yet. It hinted that she and the man in the video were partners in crime. The story was designed to plant a seed of doubt. The public, who had been so captivated by the fairy tale return, began to whisper, "Is it possible she was gone for so long? Where has she been all these years? The video does look suspicious." The whispers grew into a roar. The narrative began to shift. Was Zara Karim a long-lost daughter or a cunning imposter? Back at the estate, the family was horrified. Zara, who was just beginning to feel safe, was devastated. She saw the headlines on a tablet and broke down completely. "They think I'm lying," she sobbed into Selena's arms. "They all hate me." Mr. Karim was consumed by a protective rage. "I'll sue them all. I'll shut them down," he thundered. But Selena, ever the strategist, knew that a public war would only feed the scandal. "No," she said calmly, though her eyes were like chips of ice. "We don't fight them in the mud. We cut off the head of the snake. Victor," she said, turning to her loyal and incredibly resourceful personal assistant, "find out who's behind this. I want a name, I want proof, and I want it yesterday." Victor, a man who could find a needle in a digital haystack, simply nodded on it. He and Selena worked with quiet, ruthless efficiency. They knew Reina had to be behind it, but they needed undeniable proof. Victor started with the journalist who broke the story. He traced the man's financial records, his phone calls, his digital footprint. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Victor's investigation was a masterclass in modern intelligence gathering. He discovered a large, untraceable payment made to the journalist's offshore account just hours before the story was published. A little more digging, and he connected that account to a shell corporation, and the director of that shell corporation, Brenda, Reina's best friend. The next step was to dismantle the evidence. Victor analyzed the hotel video frame by frame. He quickly identified it as a deep fake, a clever but flawed forgery. The lighting was inconsistent, the shadows were wrong, and a flicker of digital artifacting around Zara's face gave it away. The man in the video was a stockbroker with no connection to Zara, and the original footage was from a public conference he had attended months ago. But they needed more than just technical proof. They needed a confession. Victor located the journalist holed up in a cheap hotel and paid him a visit. He didn't make threats. He simply laid out the evidence on the table. The bank statements, the phone records, the proof of the forged video. "Here's what's going to happen," Victor said, his tone calm and businesslike. "You can either face charges for fraud, defamation, and conspiracy, which will land you in prison for a very long time, or you can tell us everything, sign a full confession, and cooperate with us. Raina and Brenda will not protect you. We will." The journalist, seeing his entire world crumbling, broke down immediately. He confessed everything, detailing how Raina and Brenda had approached him, paid him, and provided him with the doctored video. With the signed confession and the irrefutable evidence in hand, Selena made her move. She didn't leak the information to the press. She called a press conference. Standing before a room packed with reporters, Selena was the picture of calm, controlled power. She didn't raise her voice. She simply presented the facts one after another with chilling precision. She showed the bank records. She played the expert analysis, debunking the video. And then she played a recording of the journalist's confession. The room was silent, then erupted into a frenzy of camera flashes and shouted questions. "This was not a mistake," Selena concluded, her voice ringing with authority. "This was a malicious, calculated attack on a young woman who has already endured more suffering than any of us can imagine. It was orchestrated by two people, Brenda Alaki and the woman who was almost a member of this family, Raina Bello. The appropriate legal actions are already underway. The Karim family will not be making any further comment. We only ask that you give Zara the privacy and peace she needs to heal." The story exploded. Raina's name was now synonymous with pure evil. Her public image was not just tarnished, it was obliterated. She was disgraced, exposed, and utterly defeated. It seemed like the nightmare was finally over. But the darkest secret was yet to be revealed. The news of Raina's public downfall sent shockwaves through the city. But for one person, it was a tremor that threatened to bring her own world crashing down. In a small, stuffy apartment, far from the glamour of Victoria Island, Naomi, Raina's younger sister, sat staring at her phone, her hands trembling. She had lived her entire life in Raina's shadow, a quiet, timid moon to her sister's blazing, destructive sun. She was a keeper of secrets, a silent accomplice to sins she barely understood, all out of a deep-seated fear of the woman she called family. But seeing the news reports, seeing the pain on Zara's face during the press conference, and knowing the truth was so much worse than what the world imagined, it had planted a seed of rebellion in her terrified heart. For days, that seed had been watered by guilt, and now it was breaking through the surface. Her conscience, so long suppressed, was screaming. With a shaking finger, she found the public number for Selena's corporate office. She almost hung up a dozen times, her heart hammering against her ribs. What if Raina found out? What would she do to her? But then the image of a bruised Zara at the wedding gate flashed in her mind, and she pressed the call button. The call was answered by Victor. His voice was professional, crisp. Naomi, her own voice a choked whisper, refused to give her name. She only said she had urgent private information for Selena Karim regarding her sister. Victor, trained to recognize the scent of a critical lead, didn't dismiss her. He handled the call with delicate care, assuring her she would be safe, and arranged a discreet meeting. They met in a neutral private conference room in a hotel, far from the prying eyes of the media. Selena was there alone, her presence calm and reassuring. She didn't push or demand. She simply poured Naomi a glass of water and waited. "Thank you for seeing me," Naomi began, her voice barely audible. She couldn't meet Selena's eyes, instead staring at her own twisting hands. I have to tell you something about my sister, about Raina." "Take your time," Selena said softly. Naomi took a shuddering breath. This thing she did, The fake video, it's not the worst of it. It's not even close. The words began to spill out, slow and painful, like pulling shards of glass from a deep wound. She spoke of Raina's obsession with Mr. Kareem, an ambition that had taken root years before she had even met him. He was a symbol, a prize to be won, Naomi whispered, finally looking up, her eyes swimming with tears. But there were obstacles, she said, voice trembling. His wife and his daughter. She knew he would never leave them. She hired some men. She told me it was just to scare them, to take the girl for a little while and then let her go. I don't know if I believed her even then, but I was too scared to say anything. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with the horror of the revelation. The kidnapping wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was the opening move in a twisted decade-long game. Selena felt a cold dread creep up her spine, but her face remained a mask of calm. What did she do, Naomi? She wanted Zara out of the picture, Naomi sobbed, the confession tearing through her. She thought if the child was gone, the marriage would fall apart, that in his grief, he would be vulnerable. Naomi continued, voice dropping to a barely audible, horrifying whisper. She poisoned her. Mrs. Kareem, she made her weak, depressed. It attacked her heart. Everyone thought she died of grief. It was the perfect cover. But she was murdered. Selena froze, every muscle in her body tensing. The confession hung in the silent room, monstrous and absolute. Naomi saw the look on Selena's face and seemed to crumble further. That's not all, she choked out. It gets worse. She explained that when the kidnapping didn't shatter the marriage, when it only drew Mr. Kareem and his wife closer in their shared agony, Raina became more desperate. She couldn't wait for grief to run its course. Naomi's voice dropped again. She told how Raina had hired men. She had paid for the kidnapping. She had planned it. Selena knew they needed more. They needed to find the men Raina had hired. Naomi, in her confession, had given them another name. Moses. Moses, she explained, was Raina's ex-lover from years ago. A man from the darker side of the city, whom she had used to do her dirty work. He was the one who had made the arrangements for the kidnapping. He was her accomplice. Victor was once again dispatched. Finding Moses was harder than finding the journalist. He was a man who lived in the shadows with no digital footprint and a deep distrust of everyone. But Victor was relentless. He used his network of informants, called in old favors, and after 3 days of tireless searching, he located Moses in a run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. The confrontation was tense. Moses was a tough, street-hardened man, not easily intimidated. But Victor didn't come with threats. He came with an offer. Naomi has told us everything, Victor said calmly, standing in the middle of Moses's sparse living room. About the kidnapping. About the poison. The police are already building a case. Right now, you are looking at being a prime accomplice to kidnapping and murder. You will go to prison for the rest of your life. Moses' face remained a stony mask. However, Victor continued, you were used by her. We know that if you tell us everything you know, if you give us the evidence we need to put Raina away for good, we can arrange for you to be a state witness. You'll still face charges, but with our help, your sentence will be significantly reduced. It's your only way out. He let the offer hang in the air. Moses stared at him, his mind working furiously. He knew Raina. He knew she would throw him to the wolves without a second thought to save herself. Loyalty to her was a death sentence. He finally broke. With a heavy sigh, he began to talk. He confessed to everything. He described how Raina, consumed by jealousy and ambition, had planned the kidnapping. He gave them the names of the 2 low-level thugs he had hired to carry it out. He explained how they were only supposed to hold Zara for a few weeks, but the media attention became so intense that they panicked and fled, abandoning the girl in a remote town. Most damningly, he confessed to helping Raina dispose of the evidence related to the poisoning. He had been the one to get rid of the vials and the records from the disgraced doctor who had supplied the substance. He told them where the doctor could be found. It was all there, every piece of the puzzle. With the confessions of Naomi and Moses, and the location of the doctor who supplied the poison, Victor had everything he needed. He turned all the evidence over to the police. The arrest was quiet, but swift. Police officers arrived at Reina's luxury apartment in the early hours of the morning. They found her sitting in the dark, surrounded by the expensive things she had acquired, looking like a queen who had lost her kingdom. When they told her she was under arrest for kidnapping, conspiracy to commit murder, and a list of other charges, she didn't even seem surprised. The fight had gone out of her. Her long, terrible game was finally over. The trial of Reina Bello was the most sensational legal case the country had seen in years. The courtroom was packed every day with journalists, socialites, and ordinary people, all captivated by the story of the beautiful, deadly social climber. Reina, stripped of her designer clothes and her confident swagger, looked small and pathetic in the defendant's box. Her defense team tried to paint her as a victim herself, a woman driven by a desperate need for love and a desire to escape her own troubled past. In her final statement to the court, she wept, her voice filled with a hollow, self-pitying sorrow. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," she cried. "I just wanted to belong. I wanted a life that mattered. I just wanted him to love me." But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The testimonies of Naomi and Moses, the confession of the journalist, the financial records, the proof from the doctor who had supplied the poison, it all painted a picture of a cold, calculating predator, not a love-struck victim. Hours later, the preliminary lab report came back from the mobile unit. The results were definitive. The evidence, the confessions, the records, everything lined up. The judge was unmoved by Reina's tears. In delivering the sentence, her voice was stern and unwavering. "You speak of wanting love," the judge said, looking directly at Reina, "but your actions were devoid of it. You preyed on a family's grief. You stole a child's life. You orchestrated a death. This was not about love. It was about greed, ambition, and a chilling lack of humanity." Reina was found guilty on all initial charges: kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy, defamation, and obstruction of justice. The murder charge for Mrs. Karim's death was still under investigation, pending further evidence, but the existing convictions were more than enough. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole. More charges, the judge noted, were likely to follow. In the courtroom, Mr. Karim and Selina watched in silent relief. There was no joy, no sense of victory, just a profound, weary sadness, and the quiet closing of a long, painful chapter. Brenda, Moses, and the others involved all faced their own separate legal battles, their lives ruined by their association with Reina's dark ambition. Justice had been delivered. The truth, after so many years in the dark, had finally come to light. With the trial over, a quiet peace began to settle over the Karim estate. For Zara, the journey of healing was just beginning. The physical scars faded quickly, but the wounds on her soul ran deep. She started therapy with a kind, patient doctor who helped her navigate the labyrinth of her trauma. She began to slowly piece together the lost years, not with fear, but with a growing sense of strength. She had survived. That was the most important truth. She resumed her education, starting with tutors at home. Her mind, once starved of knowledge, was a thirsty sponge. She devoured books, asked endless questions, and rediscovered the joy of learning that had been stolen from her. Her bond with Selina deepened into something truly special. Selina was more than just a stepsister. She was a mentor, a protector, and her closest friend. She taught Zara about the world she had been cut off from. But more importantly, she taught her how to be strong, how to trust again, and how to find her own voice. They were two sides of the same coin, one who had fought the world from within the system, the other who had survived it from the outside. Together, they were whole. Mr. Karim, for his part, dedicated himself to being the father he had almost lost the chance to be. He was patient, loving, and present. He listened to her, laughed with her, and simply cherished every moment he had with the daughter who had come back from the dead. The silence in the mansion was replaced once again. not with the loud laughter of a child, but with the quiet, steady hum of a family healing together. Inspired by their journey, Zara and Selena decided to create something positive from the ashes of their pain. They launched the Bright Seed Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping lost, abused, and forgotten girls across Nigeria. It was to be a beacon of hope, a place of refuge, and a promise that no girl would have to suffer in silence as Zara had. One quiet morning, months later, Zara was sitting under the large jacaranda tree in the garden, the same garden where she had been taken all those years ago. But it was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of peace. She was writing in a leather-bound journal, her pen moving gracefully across the page. Selena walked up and sat beside her on the soft grass. "What are you writing?" she asked gently. Zara looked up, her face serene, her eyes clear and bright. A soft smile touched her lips. "My story," she said, her voice quiet, but full of a strength that had been forged in fire. "I'm writing the story of a girl the world thought was gone, but who came back stronger." Selena put her arm around Zara's shoulders, and together they looked out at the sun-drenched garden. The past was a part of them, a story of pain and betrayal, but it no longer defined them. The future stretched out before them, quiet, honest, and filled with a hope that was as real and as bright as the morning sun. The girl who was lost had finally truly come home.